There's an old Hasidic teaching that says more than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. And we often hear those words as a statement about survival. Through exile, persecution, migration, and change, Shabbat has been a thread that has stitched Jewish life together. But perhaps those words can mean something even more profound. Perhaps Shabbat has not simply preserved us. Perhaps Shabbat has protected us from becoming slaves again. Not slaves to Pharaoh, but slaves to productivity, slaves to technology, slaves to endless striving, slaves to the belief that our value depends on how much we accomplish. In a culture that never stops moving, Shabbat is not simply a day off. Let's see it as an act of resistance. It is a revolution. When God gives the Israelites the 10 Commandments, the commandment to observe Shabbat is unlike the others. We're not merely told to rest. We're told to remember that we were slaves in Egypt. That connection seems strange. What does slavery have to do with taking one day off each week? Well, everything. A slave cannot choose when to stop working. A slave's worth is measured entirely by output. A slave exists only to produce. God commands Shabbat because freedom means more than escaping Egypt. Freedom means learning that your humanity comes before your productivity. Every seventh day, the Torah tells us you are more than what you make. You're more than what you earn. You're more than what you produce. You simply are. Now, the ancient rabbis, I think, understood how radical this was. In the ancient world, kings didn't rest, laborers didn't rest, animals didn't rest, foreigners didn't rest. And yet the Torah insists that everyone rests. The wealthy, the poor, the servant, the stranger, even the ox and the donkey. Shabbat democratizes dignity. For 24 hours every week, status disappears. We become simply human beings created b'tselem Elohim in the image of God. When Rabbi Heschel famously called Shabbat a palace in time, he's reminding us that Judaism is less interested in owning sacred places than in creating sacred moments. We build skyscrapers. Judaism builds time. But Heschel also warned us about something remarkably modern. He wrote, "Technical civilization is man's conquest of space. It is a triumph frequently achieved by sacrificing an essential ingredient of our human existence, namely time." Think about that for a moment. We've conquered distance. We can send a message around the world instantly. We can attend meetings from anywhere. Artificial intelligence can write documents in seconds. Our phones place the world's knowledge in our pockets. And somehow, we have less time than ever. Our culture praises busyness. The first question we ask one another is, "How have you been?" And we expect the answer to be busy. Almost as though being busy proves we're important somehow. We have mistaken exhaustion for significance. We wear burnout like a badge of honor. And even our leisure becomes productive. We can track our steps. We can optimize our sleep, turn our hobbies into side hustles, document vacations instead of experiencing them. Our lives can become endless checklists. Rabbi Sandra Lawson captures this beautifully when she recently wrote, "Shabbat invites us to resist the lie that our worth is determined by our productivity. It reminds us that simply being is holy." I think that's really a remarkable sentence. Simply being is holy. Not earning, not achieving, not proving, being. That is deeply countercultural, perhaps even revolutionary. Our smartphones don't know what Shabbat is. Emails can arrive at midnight. News alerts interrupt dinner. Social media invites endless comparison. Our work follows us home. And even when we stop working, our minds continue buzzing. We're physically present, but mentally elsewhere. We become people who are constantly connected and increasingly disconnected. We're disconnected from one another, disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from God. And Shabbat interrupts all of that. It creates what one scholar calls holy inconvenience. For one day we choose limits, not because technology is evil and not because work is bad, but because neither deserves to become our master. The Talmud teaches that every week we receive a neshama yetera, an additional soul on Shabbat. We sing Vishamru on Shabbat, verses directly from the Torah, Exodus 31, verses 16 to 17, which include the words Uvayom Hashvi'i, and on the seventh day, Shavat Vayinafash. Shavat ceased, rested, Vayinafash, and caught a breath, was resouled. And when we say goodbye to Shabbat, making Havdalah on Saturday night, we take in the odor of besamim, of spices like clove, cinnamon, or basil, or mint that help that extra soul linger a while as we transition from the holy to the mundane week. Whether we understand that literally or metaphorically, it speaks to an important truth. There are parts of ourselves that only can emerge when we slow down. The creative self, the grateful self, the compassionate self, the playful self, the spiritual self. They cannot compete with constant noise. They require silence, presence, rest. Here's an old story about a fisherman. And a wealthy businessman finds him relaxing beside his boat, and the businessman says, "Why aren't you fishing?" "I've caught enough fish today," the fisherman replies. "But if you caught more fish, you could buy a bigger boat." Fisherman says, "And then?" Businessman says, "And then you could hire workers. And then you could build a fishing empire. And then, well, eventually you could retire. And then," and the businessman finally smiles, "then you could relax by the water." And the fisherman laughs. "I'm already doing that." It's not a story against ambition. It's really asking a deeper question. Are we postponing the very life we are trying to build? Shabbat says, don't wait until retirement to experience joy. Do not postpone wonder. Do not delay gratitude. Life is happening now. As Jews today, many of us do not observe Shabbat exactly as our ancestors did. Few of us avoid electricity, for example. Many of us drive to synagogue. Many of us check our phones before we make Havdalah. But perhaps the deeper question isn't whether we observe every traditional restriction. Perhaps the question is, does Shabbat interrupt our ordinary lives? Does it change us? If Saturday looked exactly like Tuesday, only with bagels after the services, have we really encountered Shabbat? Or have we simply attended synagogue? Let's imagine what Shabbat could become. A family meal without phones, a walk without earbuds, reading for pleasure instead of obligation, blessing children, calling parents, playing board games, taking a nap without guilt, studying Torah, singing, laughing, praying, looking up at the stars, actually noticing one another. These are not small things. They're acts of resistance against a culture determined to fragment our attention. One of the Hebrew words for holy is kadosh, and it means set apart. Holiness isn't about escaping the world. It's about creating difference. Shabbat says this day is different. These hours are different. These relationships are different. I am different, not because the world has changed, but because I have. What is the set apartness of Shabbat? Halakha, Jewish law, categorizes 39 melachot, categories of creative work that are to be rested from. To us, they seem archaic, restrictive, too far removed from the logic of our modern life. But according to Rabbi Dr. Shmuley Yanklowitz, one of America's most inspiring rabbis, the melachot that define the work that cannot be done on the Sabbath day are strikingly relevant for the modern condition. He suggests that we are able to find the solution to our contemporary troubles by going back thousands of years to the debates of the ancient sages. In his book, Shabbat As Revolution, 39 Ways to Renew Creation and Change the World, he connects past and present, covers every malacha through a lens of contemporary social action and engagement with moral philosophy. It's a read I recommend that ties our past and present contemplations and discernment together so thoughtfully. The world tells us that if we stop, everything will fall apart. The Torah tells us exactly the opposite. If we never stop, we will fall apart. Our relationships will, our spirits will, our communities will, our capacity for compassion will. Rest is not the reward for finishing our work. It is what allows us to continue doing meaningful work. So this week, I want to invite each of us to try one small revolution, one intentional act of Shabbat. Maybe it's turning your phone off for an hour or more. Maybe it's blessing your family before dinner. Maybe it's taking a walk without checking your messages. Maybe it's reading something that nourishes your soul instead of your inbox. Maybe it's simply sitting quietly long enough to hear your own thoughts. Because every small act of sacred rest declares something extraordinary. It says, I refuse to believe that my value depends on constant productivity. I refuse to let anxiety define my schedule. I refuse to surrender every moment to distraction. And instead, I choose holiness. I choose presence. I choose freedom. The revolution of Shabbat is not about escaping life. It is about reclaiming it. Every Friday evening as the sun begins to set, Judaism whispers an ancient truth into our modern ears. You have done enough. You are enough. Now, rest. Shabbat Shalom.